Hi everyone, this is a presentation on collective bargaining in the healthcare setting. The author Sullivan defines collective bargaining as a collective action that is taken by workers to secure better wages or working conditions. After this presentation, the learner should be able to understand how collective bargaining is organized, what advantages and disadvantages collective bargaining poses for nurses, and the role of the nurse manager and staff within the collective bargaining unit. The history of collective bargaining began in 1935 when the National Labor Relations Act was initiated. Nurses and other employees of private, for-profit healthcare institutions were protected in their right to organize for collective bargaining purposes. When the act was amended in 1974, employees of voluntary, not-for-profit healthcare institutions were also able to take advantages of the rights and protections of collective bargaining. The Civil Services Reform Act of 1978 then allowed certain federal employees who were previously not included to participate in some collective bargaining activities, but however, not without prohibiting the subject of wages to be negotiated. As of 2017, the Department of Professional Employees reported that over 6 million professionals use collective bargaining in their workplace. In order to utilize collective bargaining, a union needs to be in place. After the union is formed and certified, which we'll explain a little bit more in the next slide, the bargaining process of negotiations can begin between nursing and management. Collective bargaining is headed by an agent who is an appointed employee staff nurse. In the 2013 book, Effective Leadership and Management in Nursing, Sullivan explains that bargaining laws may be different depending on whether or not nurses are employed in a private versus a public sector. Private sectors include nonprofit or for-profit organizations, and in that case, the wages, hours, and other terms of conditions of work are considered eligible for negotiation. Whereas public sectors include city, county, state, or federal employees, and these employees face more strict rules on negotiable subjects. To begin an union and organize collective bargaining, it can be a lengthy process, but the hope is that the end result will be worth it and give nurses a stronger voice to make change. To begin the process of collective bargaining, a group of nurses that support collective bargaining need to be assembled. Then meetings need to be arranged with a representative of the State Nurses Association. During this meeting, the feasibility of the organizing campaign is assessed. Following the meeting, it is necessary to conduct research to develop a plan of action. Once a plan of action is formed, committees and subcommittees then are formed. The process of obtaining union authorization cards will begin after the subcommittees and committees are formed and develop a plan of action. Informal meetings for nurses eligible for collective bargaining unit will then proceed. Keeping the lines of communication open with all staff members is an important process to remember. And then seeking voluntary recognition from the employer is something that will also occur along the path of the collective bargaining unit. When informal actions are completed, the committees and subcommittees will move toward formal organization of the unit. Finally, one last major step prior to the initiation of contract negotiations is to seek certification from the National Labor Relations Board as the exclusive bargaining agent of the unit. As nurses, we're often emotionally, mentally, and physically invested in our jobs and our patients, and it can be pretty easy to get burnt out by the demands of the working conditions if they're less than optimal. The author O'Brien states, nurses are responsible for creating a moral environment where respect, honesty, and discussion of challenging issues can be addressed. By forming unions and using collective bargaining, nurses' voices can be heard. Some of the factors that influence nurses to engage in collective bargaining include feelings of powerlessness, the desire to have a voice about changes regarding wages, staffing, patient safety, and job security without the fear of losing jobs, and the strong desire to initiate change. Within a collective bargaining unit, the nurse manager and the nurses have important roles to be aware of. The nurse manager must be aware of the categories of unfair labor practices. The author Sullivan lists unfair labor practices as interference with the right to organize, domination, encouraging or discouraging union membership, and firing an employee for giving testimony or filing a charge with the National Labor Board Relations, and refusal to bargain collectively. The nurse manager is also responsible for participating in resolving grievances using all grievance procedures that have been agreed upon. When nurses function as a collective bargaining unit, they have the role and responsibility to be knowledgeable about all legal rights and laws and be sure their actions are reflective of those legal rights and laws. They also play an important role in keeping all staff nurses informed through regular meetings. Along with knowing legal rights and laws, the nurse also holds the duty of reporting any lawful acts by the manager to the National Labor Board Relations. When a nurse union uses collective bargaining, they can gain advantages that allow them to participate in decision making. This participation can allow voices to be heard so adequate staffing can be met for better patient safety, which author O'Brien reports as being the ultimate overall goal for nurses within a collective bargaining unit. Through negotiations and concrete contracts, nurses can achieve pay increases that include overtime pay, merit pay, and better benefits. In addition to the patient safety and financial benefits, nurses can also benefit from contracts that guide standards when it comes to addressing grievances and disciplines. When standards are in place, it allows for fair and same treatment for all nurses across the board. With advantages always comes disadvantages. When a union is in place and collective bargaining occurs, there's always opportunity to strike if management is not in agreement with nursing negotiations. When a strike occurs, patients are not being taken care of, and alternative ways for patients to be taken care of need to be enforced. But this can cause some moral and ethical dilemmas for the nurses involved that aren't able to take care of the patients during strike. And also when there's disagreements and the feeling of one party versus the other, this can cause nurse members and management to have a disjointed relationship. Other disadvantages include that all members must abide by the contracts whether they are in agreement or not. And finally, the payment of yearly dues can also be seen as a downfall. This video is a real-life example of how nurses feel about collective bargaining through a union. This will hopefully help you understand the whole picture a little bit better.
Makes everything more equal and more fair for everyone across the board.
It doesn't seem like that would be the best change for us.
Some conflicting feelings among 1,200 registered nurses at Munson Medical Center about forming a union. Last night on 9 and 10 News, the chief nursing officer at Munson Medical Center said she believes joining a union would be a bad move for registered nurses. Tonight, we are hearing from the nurses themselves. 9 and 10's Caroline Powers continues our coverage with those who are for and against unionizing.
For the last 3 months, some registered nurses at Munson Medical Center have been looking into forming a union, but others at the hospital say it would be the wrong move.
We're the heart of the hospital. We're there 24/7.
At the end of 2016, a group of registered nurses at Munson Medical Center reached out to the Michigan Nurses Association.
It's patient and staff safety. That is why we approach the youth. Sometimes we feel like our thoughts maybe fall on deaf ears a little bit.
Donna Heinrich, Elizabeth Budnick, and Shannon Gilsby say wages and benefits, short staffing, and ultimately patient care are why they want to join a union.
I don't view the union as a third party. I mean, we are the ones organizing it. It's run by Munson nurses.
When you belong to a union and you are collective in your voice, you can make changes that you think you want to make for your patients.
But on the general medicine floor of the hospital, George Bullard says it's not something he's interested in.
You don't really hear it on our floor. It's a few nurses talking amongst a big crowd.
Bullard says joining a union would take away the relationship the staff has with management.
I feel bad for nurses that are struggling or feel like they're struggling or they can't get through to who they need to get through to, but that never seemed to be an issue, at least on my floor. Our unit manager, all of our higher up staff work really close with us. We're able to have a voice.
Heinrich, Bunnick, and Gillespie say this is just the beginning, but they will continue their hard work for their patients.
Everything takes time. Nothing happens overnight. Change is a long, delicate process.
In Traverse City, Caroline Powers, 9 and 10 News at 6.
This is a case study, hopefully also to help you understand a little bit more about the collective bargaining, how it works with the grievance process. It can be found in the 2013 Sullivan book, Effective Leadership and Management, on page 313. So if you pause this video and read over the case study, then we can explain a little bit how the grievances are helpful. Through the collective bargaining contract within this hospital, it gives the manager strict guidelines on how to handle a situation like this and treat every nurse with the same actions when this type of discipline is needed. Maria was given strict guidelines on how to handle Tia and her lack of documentation, so that it was a formal meeting and that each guideline was met so that there wasn't favoritism handled within this nurse versus another nurse. And finally, this is a short video to help you, after all this presentation filled with a lot of information, hopefully this brief summary of collective bargaining will bring it all together. Thank you for viewing this presentation. I hope you have a better understanding of what a union and collective bargaining are and how nurses can use collective bargaining to achieve nurse satisfaction, not only through financial incentives and standard guidelines for the staff discipline process, as well as quality patient care through things like improved staffing.